conversation and look at this question from a local perspective. After the recent Supreme Court decisions, many local activists felt empowered to start collecting signatures to put a marriage initiative on the ballot for the 2014 election cycle. We know that a Miami-based group has been collecting signatures in Florida. Nadine, can you talk to us about the timeline for marriage equality in Florida? And then Ray, I'll have you follow up and talk about similar initiatives in other states. Nadine?
Sure. Well, just sort of tag teaming off what was just said, we see the best path through the courts. And in fact, we put out a call for potential plaintiffs, and within days we had 540-something couples respond to tell their stories. And we have a campaign called Get Engaged, which is also the public education side of it. And what we've learned in state after state where marriage has been won is it has to be a conversation about love stories. It can't simply be a conversation about numbers and finances and antiseptic language. That's what shifts hearts and minds. What we know in Florida is that the Florida legislature, that's really not a path. The courts, we believe, are the best path, though challenging. And we're not prepared to take the ballot measure completely off the table, but I will say this: the language that was actually imported from Arizona, the effort you're talking about, is terrible language. We've had all of the smart legal folks look at it, and even if it were through some miracle of miracles to pass, it actually wouldn't secure what we were going for, and we think the timing is just wrong. To go prematurely is to invite a loss at a moment of incredible momentum. People don't realize this, but Florida actually leads the Deep South in terms of public support for marriage equality. When you look at Nate Silver's numbers, he says if nothing else changes, if we didn't accelerate it at all, 2020 we'd reach that 60% plus number. Well, we're doing everything we can to accelerate it, and I also think that these things shift not just a little drip at a time, but in orders of magnitude. There's also the perception gap, right? So many of us who came out had this experience. You come out to your brother, I'm cool, but don't tell mom and dad. You come out to mom, I'm good, but don't tell your father, you know how he is. And every time, everyone thinks everybody else is going to be worse than their worst imagining. And we have that perception gap. So even though in some of the latest polls, 56% of Floridians support marriage equality, 64% assume that the majority don't. And that perception gap makes cowards. Yeah, that perception gap makes cowards of people. It keeps folks who ought to be speaking very powerfully on this, sort of waiting for that tipping point moment. So for us, absolutely, we see the path through the courts. We've got incredible folks who have stepped forward to offer their families up as plaintiffs, which is no small thing. And we're going to continue to do the hearts and minds, because we don't pretend that courts make decisions in a context, and it matters where public opinion is, and it matters the stories that we tell. And we need people to tell those stories regardless of whether you're a plaintiff. There are amazing love stories in this room. I know some of you. And we need people to hear those stories, because that calls the question. And I'll just end with this. I've got Tea Party friends from my high school. I grew up in Panama City, Florida, a.k.a. the Redneck Riviera. And so I will have pitched battles on Facebook about the presidential politics and the Affordable Health Care Act, and they'll always end with, give Andrea my love, and how's Logan? There's sort of this ability to connect as parents and as spouses at a different level, and I think that is our secret weapon right now.
That's great. So Ray, what are you